So I hope to talk about varying things that are talked about in my corner of the YouTube universe in the upcoming days, but I'd like to talk about race. And this video is specifically targeted towards the race realists, and in particular, Start Making Sense, who I believe most recently subscribed to my channel, though I'll leave a PM to you. And so anybody watching this who isn't race realist, you can feel free to watch it, but this really isn't directed as a, towards you. It's more of a question I have to ask for race realists. And so, feel free to skip this video or feel free to watch it and share it with other people because I want more subscribers or whatever. Sorry if that's YouTube whoring and you have a problem with that, but you know what? That's a different issue. I'll just talk about that in another video. But yeah, so race realists. I'm not, first of all, let me say, I'm not interested in having a debate whether or not race is a real concept. It's an important issue and an important thing to talk about. However, my position is pretty much summed up in what Skeptical Heretic and a lot of other people have said most recently and in the past. I don't believe, personally, that race is a valid concept. I don't think there's biological factors that would indicate that it's real. I think it's a social construct. But however, though, if it makes it easier for you to accept my arguments and really address what I'm trying to say, assume that I do. Assume that I believe that race is a real concept. Assume that I am a race realist for all intents and purposes. I don't care. If that makes it easier for you to address what I want to say, do that then. So, if I don't want to talk about whether race is a real concept or not, what do I really want to talk about? Well, what I want to talk about is this. I have a question for race realists. Here's the question. Why are you a race realist? Why are you a race realist? What's the purpose of entertaining the notion of race? So the basic question is, what are your motivations for being a race realist? Because as was demonstrated and as was said by Start Making Sense, and I think you put it well, there's a difference between being a racist and being a race realist. And I also would go a step further by saying there's a difference between a race realist and a racist and a supremacist. But, that all that goes to show is that each race realist is going to have the same motivation and they're going to have different motivations for being a race realist. And so that's what I'm interested in, is your unique motivation for being a race realist. Not all rectangles are squares, but some squares are rectangles. Not all race realists are racists, but all racists are probably race realists. And not all atheists are anti-theists, but all anti-theists are probably atheists. So yeah, I understand that. Why are you a race realist? And so after that, though, because I didn't just want to have like a 30-second video, because I just could have done that, I would like to just several of the things that I believe people could say, and specifically, this is a response to Start Making Sense, or a video towards Start Making Sense, so I'm going to target you. And feel free to correct me if I've misrepresented you, and that's why I'm asking this of you. But after having had watched the video on YouTube of the debate between you and Skeptical Heretic, here are 3 potential answers I believe that you could say. First, social benefits. And the way that I deducted this was through several things that you said throughout the debate. But the first thing was at the beginning of the video was that you basically had said something amongst the lines of, you can't respect somebody's ethnicity if you don't, or respect them as being different if you don't believe that they're of another race. And I think you said, somebody go please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to watch the entire debate again, it's kind of a boring thing, but it was in the first like 3 or 4 minutes of when you started actually talking about the debate, was that if we were to deny that black people exist, or to deny that they are of a black race, would be to deny their unique culture and to deny to deny their culture, to deny their uniqueness, to deny their heritage, and their integrity. And integrity, by the way, I have no idea what you meant, and I'm not sure if you actually said integrity, but if you did, please explain. But the other things I take an issue with. First of all, what is a black culture? What is the black culture? I don't think culture and genetics have anything to do with each other. I don't think any biological factor and culture have anything to do with each other. Well, not substantially anyways. So feel free to explain that one. I don't think that your genetics, even as an individual, define who you're going to be and what your culture is going to be. You can be a white guy in Africa, and let's say there's a white baby born in, a white baby, whatever that means. Let's say, like I said, let's say race is a real thing. Let's say that a white baby or a baby from America was raised in the heart of Africa, and not like one of the rich colonized segments of Africa, but I mean in the wild kind of Africa. what's their culture going to be? Are they going to have an American or a white culture because of their genetics, or is it going to be something more adapted to that local location? I would say the entire continent of Africa probably each has their own segment, their different cultures. I mean, you can go from one city to another city anywhere in the world that are right next to each other, and they're going to have different cultures. And you go to two different cities that have pretty much the same kind of people. Let's say you go from city A with all white people, and you go to city B with all white people. Let's say hypothetically these cities exist. They're going to have radically different cultures. That's just a matter of fact, because cultures have nothing to do with genetics. And so that's my first thing. Heritage is not so much an issue of race either, as was proven by Skeptical Heretic, when he basically explained how he'd done some sort of test to show that he had been from various different places over the world. Like, I think he said that one of his ancestors was from North Africa, like relatively recent ancestors, not like, not like, where all of our ancestors are all from Africa. I'm saying like one of his more recent ancestors is from Northern Africa. And so, but he's, are you still going to say he's African? So race has little to do with heritage. It's, heritage to me really has to do with culture and also national identity. Second wave, second generation people who are immigrants. So let's say that you have a person who is a first generation immigrant. So somebody like a person who's crossed the border from Mexico to America. They have kids, and their kids have kids with third generation, the grandchildren of the people who came over the border. And so these people are Americans, and they're raised in American culture, wherever they are. Their heritage is not so much like, the Hispanic culture or the Hispanic heritage. It's more of the fact that they have a heritage of people who lived in Mexico. So the heritage is with the location and not the people, and with the people's, and with whom their relatives had, their culture development, So, let's say that I have, let's say my grandparents are completely German, but they lived in Ireland, and they lived in Ireland all their lives until they moved to America, which is like close to the truth. What I would say is that my heritage is one part Germany because they were born in Germany, and one part Irish because their cultural identity was from Ireland. But it has nothing to do with the genetic factors. And you never really explain why we can't respect somebody's heritage at an individual level. You don't have to really categorize them. I could say, I respect your genetic and your cultural heritage based off of your unique genetic factors. I don't have to, I can go that specific. I don't have to be, vague, which is what I think race is. It's a vague concept. Not that those things are really important. I've never really had a problem with respecting somebody on the grounds of their ethnicity or their heritage or their cultural identity because of not recognizing that they're a black person. I've never had that issue. Feel free to explain that, though. If you haven't had an encounter where you could not find yourself respecting them without saying that they are of a different race, I think that there are other issues going at hand. I don't think it has to do with the fact that you couldn't recognize them as being of a different race. That's not an important thing to respect. It's not a prerequisite. So there's not, as far as I can see, social benefits to using the term race. In fact, I see social consequences, which I'll address later. Second thing I could potentially see you saying is scientific benefits. At the very beginning of the debate, in your opening, you basically said that in modern science, race is used in things like anthropology and criminology and pharmacology and creation of vaccines for particular ethnic groups. And as was also talked about in the debate was this notion of clines or eco-clines or eco-clines. Just clines is what I'm going to say. Well, if clines can do the exact same thing with a specific criteria in a particular type of cline, because as was also said, if you manipulate the criteria, you're going to have a different number of clines. If those things can do the exact same thing as race in anthropology and in criminology, but do it better, why not do that? If we can pin down that somebody is specifically from Wyoming, why do we care of whether they are a white person or a black person? And we could say their skin color is most likely this, a skin tone, not like white, black, Middle Eastern. I'm saying like specific hue, the specific tone of their skin color. If we can do these things without referring to races, and we can really categorize people off of individual tones of skin color, and we could basically profile them that way in a non-discriminatory way. Why do we need to use races? What's the unique benefit to races that something like a Klein could not do? I don't see this major gap in scientific research like you do in other things like the denial of global warming. It's arguable that the denial of global warming has meant that there's a divergence of resources from finding solutions to whether or not it's really a concept or not, and whether it's real or not. You could say too much effort is being focused on whether it's real or not, and not enough of it's being focused on solutions. And so you could say that the denial of its existence is an obstacle to avoiding catastrophe in the far future or in the near future, which would be the result of global warming. So that's a direct consequence. But I don't see that, and I don't see any kind of gap in scientific knowledge because people aren't using race as a valid taxonomy. If you can explain which specific studies aren't being researched or what things aren't being looked at because race is not being used by mainstream science, I'd love to know what those are. So that's my second big thing. Third big thing, and tell me, by the way, what benefits are going to come out of that. And the third big thing is positivism, which kind of ties into both. You had a problem with political correctness. By the way, I thought it was silly, by the way, that you had political correctness was so concrete defined, and you said you had like a list of definitions, but you didn't really have a list of definitions of races, or you didn't have a precise one definition of race. You didn't tell us whether there was black, if there was seven or six races, and so that's silly because the debate was about race and it wasn't about political correctness. And you can refer to things like bone structures, but that's really vague. Is bone structures the only factor? And what would make somebody white based off of their bone structure? What characteristics and what properties of bone structure really determine somebody's race? And their cranial measurements and size of their eye sockets and whatnot. What properties of those things really determine it? And is it only bone structure, or is it muscle tissue? Is it a specific shape of organs or something like that? Eye color, hair color, skin color, height, weight, intelligence. Is it just bone structure? Give us the particular properties and tell us how many races there are. You can't just say that there's 6 or 7. And by the way, I'm interested in why there's a question of whether there's 6 or not. Is there some vague group of people that they're like, oh well, we could say that Indians and Asian people are separate, but it's close, so we don't know whether there are 6 or 7 races. What's preventing you from saying whether there are 6 or 7? And so, having that said, that's silly. But political correctness, though, your big issue with political correctness, it seems, is you don't like and nobody debated your definition, and I agree with your definition of political correctness. That's the suppression and the bending of truth to not offend people. But I don't think that's the justification for why scientists don't use race as a valid taxonomy. I don't believe you when you say that in the guidelines of taxonomy that it says, and I do believe you this far. I believe you when it says, and by the way, you should have read it out loud, and maybe you did, and maybe somebody wants to correct me and tell me that I'm stupid for not hearing that. I believe you, though, when it says that it explicitly forbids the use of race as a taxonomy. However, where I doubt you, and maybe it's true, is that it says because people will get offended. Because people will get offended. I think they have other justifications. However, even if it does say because people will get offended, that's just one justification for not using it as a taxonomy. There are a slew of other reasons which have been brought up by other people for not using it. And the big one, and the one I believe that scientists really use for not using it as a taxonomy, are social implications, which you choose to ignore, essentially. Things like social Darwinism, things like ethnic cleansing, eugenics, genocide, social profiling, segregation, discrimination of any sort based off of race. Those are direct social implications of really trying to have the scientific community use as a valid taxonomy. Whether or not the scientists really are going to be involved in these social consequences doesn't change the fact that they are going to be hijacked by other people. You can't ignore those things, and I think that's the real reason that they don't use it as taxonomy, aside from the fact that they don't believe it to be a taxonomy, if that makes any sense. But that being said, though, Why not just ignore the social consequences as you have done, and why not just ignore the ethical implications of as you have done? Because all that matters is truth. It's the be all end all. It's all that really matters. And I take a problem with this, as was kind of said by Big Lundy, in several of his videos and his chats with people. Science, and I think Skeptical Heretic said this actually to Big Lundy in his debate with Big Lundy. There's a place for philosophy in science, and there's a place for politics in science. I don't know if they went that step further, but I would definitely say that science is not some sort of field of study that exists in a vacuum. It serves a purpose, and it's not all about the truth. It's not just all about the quick finding the truth. And here's the problem with that. If we take this mindset to the extreme, you get these insane experiments which are really just trying to find the truth about things, and they lead to fucking terrible, horrendous, things. Like look at probably one of the least controversial ones I can really think of, which are still controversial. It wasn't condemned completely. Was the Milgram study in I think it was Stanford. Somebody want to correct me? Go feel free to do that. In which they were testing human obedience, even though none of it was really true. The test subjects didn't know that, and they were basically manipulating test subjects and basically wanting to see the truth of how far people would go to basically hurt somebody, how obedient they would be, how much shock therapy they would use on somebody, would they go to the extreme of killing a person, and so that's the most light thing I could think of where they ignore the social implications in the search for truth. Why don't we do things like just human experimentation? We do experiments like in psychology, but they have to be consensual, and they have to be honest. You can't deceive people, or if you do deceive them, you have to have a specific contract, and you have to tell them that they're being deceived, even if you don't tell them what they're being deceived about. You don't just ignore these things for the search of the higher truth, even if they would yield better results, if they'd yield more accurate results, if it would get rid of some confounding variable. They don't ignore these things. So why don't they just do forced human experimentation in the name of getting better results? Look at things like Little Albert experiment, which was trying to find whether fear was inborn or whether it was something that was socially constructed, or nature versus kind of nurture. And they psychologically traumatized a baby. And look at things like the monster experiment or something like that, where they psychologically traumatized children to again accomplish similar goals. And look at things where they have like aversion therapy, where they were trying to discover whether sexual identity could be removed through the use of aversion therapy. So they were trying to convert homosexuals into heterosexuals. They were trying to find out whether that's a truth, whether homosexuality was really a choice or not. And they would go as far to do these terrible things to these people, and they would do sex changes and things like that to them in the search for higher truth. Look at Unit 731 in the Japanese military in World War II, where they did live vivisections on Chinese and American prisoners of war and sometimes political enemies, and they did this in Germany too, by the way, I think. To figure out higher truths of anatomy. They just ignored the ethical implications of their actions, and they just went and did it. They did things like live vivisections without anesthetics on these people. They would connect organs that weren't meant to go together, like maybe they connect your lower intestine to your spleen or something like that, or directly to your stomach or something like that. They would do these insane experiments where they would do things like use chemical weapons on people, unconsenting, obviously, for the search of a higher truth on human anatomy. They were looking for a higher truth. You can't just ignore the implications there, and you can't just ignore the social implications. And so, having all that said, again, my question is, why are you a race realist? What's the advantage of entertaining this notion of race being real or not? Feel free to respond. Thank you.